Hi, TSF family. We wanted to give you an update on our Patreon offering. Due to the questionable practices of Patreon at the moment, we have decided to discontinue hosting our patron support on their platform, and we have replaced it with a monthly patronage through our website, www.thisspiritualfix.com, for those who wish to support the podcast and the healing it brings to all of us. Simply go to the homepage and scroll down to find the donate button for an opportunity to become a monthly patron. Thank you, truly. We are overjoyed by the love and support that you, our listeners and remote family, have given us these last 2 years, and we hope to continue that into the future. Hello, TSF family, and welcome to episode 8 of season 6, where today we are interviewing the renowned author Neale Donald Walsch. Enjoy.
Hypnosis, mindfulness, meditation, past life regression, RTT, spirituality.
This Spiritual Fix. 2 mystical mamas hacking the self-help game.
With Anna Stromquist and Christina Wiltsey.
Neale Donald Walsch has written 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life, including 9 books in the Conversation with God series, 7 of which made the New York Times bestseller list. Book 1 remained on that list for 134 weeks. His titles have been translated into 37 languages and have been read by millions of people around the world. Enjoy our interview with Neale Donald Walsch.
Hello, Christina.
Hello, Anna.
And welcome to Neale Donald Walsch to the show. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with both of you. How can I serve the moment?
Well, we've got some questions for you, especially for our listeners who have never read your books before. You wrote Conversations with God. I believe was it published in 2000?
No, 1995.
1995. It was one of the first spiritual books I ever read. I think I was like 16 or 17 when I found it. So like 96, 97. And it was kind of my first introduction to, in a way, Vedantism. It's kind of about, in the book, for anyone who hasn't read it, you, Neale, or Mr. Walsh, I should say.
No. Neale was just fine. Either Neale or your Highness.
Your Highness, your Royal Highness, Neale. I think you were writing an angry letter to God, but then the pen kind of jiggled in your hand and it wrote back. And it's it became a 3-part book series about you talking to God. And for someone like me who I grew up in the Jewish religion, but I had a lot of questions unanswered, and I had a lot of feelings about God that were a lot more loving than the way I was taught in the Torah. And it was like everything you were writing made so much sense. And in a nutshell, I would say it was basically showing how we are but God's dreaming himself kind of thing. And what would you say is Conversations with God in a nutshell? That probably was a really bad summary.
Well, but I think in a nutshell, I would say that the Conversations with God experience is a dialogue between God and all of humanity. That's number one.
Yeah.
It was never intended for me. It was never intended to be just for me alone. It was an experience I was having privately. It was a very private, sacred experience that I never, ever, ever dreamed anyone would ever read. My handwritten notes that I was taking down on a yellow legal pad. But as it turned out, it's wound up being read by multi-millions of people in 37 languages. But what I would describe it as is a communication from life about life. It's there is, I think, an essence in life that people call God or the divine or the higher power that's continually communicating to us about who we are, why we're here, and what's true about all of life. And it tends to, I almost want to say, this is a strong word to use, but it tends to debunk much of what we were told about God whether we grew up in the Jewish faith or the Catholic faith, or we were the Buddhist as a child, or Muslim, or whatever, because most of the world's religions and faith traditions, and by the way, there are 4,223 faith traditions now being practiced on the planet. Not, I don't mean from the beginning of time, I mean in this day and age.
Wow.
Over 4,200 faith traditions now being practiced, and most of those faith traditions say something about God that is not found anywhere in the Conversations with God material. Most of those faith traditions tell us about a God who is mean, who is cruel, who is actually killing, who tells us to kill other people who don't believe the way God wants us to believe, or who tells us that if it's not about killing other people, at the very least, if we don't believe in God the way we're supposed to believe in God, we're going to hell. And we'll be suffering everlasting damnation. That's what I was taught as a child. But believe it or not, I'm a 9-year-old innocent child, and I'm being taught of a God who will send me to everlasting damnation if I don't believe in God in a certain particular way. So when I had my conversation with God, I began asking questions. Can any of this be true? Is that really who you are? And the answer that I got was no. It's all a story that human beings made up for various reasons, and not all of them nefarious. Most of the religions of the world mean well. They're simply incomplete. I was told that we are kind of like children who have learned to add and subtract. Like we do when we're in the second, third grade, we learn how to add and subtract. And we think that's all there is to mathematics because we've learned how to add and subtract. And only when we grow up do we realize, oh, I see. There's algebra. Oh, there's geometry. Oh, there's trigonometry. Oh, there's higher math. In other words, there's more going on here than meets the eye. So now I see that the same is true of our religions. Religions bring us much wisdom. There's enormous wisdom in the Torah, in the Bible, in other books of the Bible, in the Quran, in the Bhagavad Gita. And there's much wisdom in all of the holy books of all the world's religions, but they're incomplete. They don't tell the whole story, and because they are incomplete, they create a false impression of who and what God is, to say nothing about a false impression of who and what we are and why we're here, why we're living. Got to be very careful. You asked me a 30-second question, and I'm going to give you a 2.5-hour answer.
It's perfect. It's wonderful. Thank you. What is coming to me is the question is, after that first moment, like after, you wrote down on your yellow legal pad, how did that change you in the course of your life? Like after that moment when that first happened?
Well, it caused me to believe firmly in the existence of the highest power. That's number one. And it allowed me to trust that this so-called higher power, that and I've given that higher power the name God. It's caused me to trust in God and to realize, as I said a minute ago, that there's more going on here than meets the eye. It's also because of the content of the 3,000 pages of dialogue that I have experienced. Because of that content, it's caused me to see the role that I have been invited by life itself to play in the expression, in the experience of who I really am, in my true identity. So I've come to understand that I and all sentient beings in the cosmos have been given power placed within me as part of the essence of who I am, the power to impact and to create my own personal reality. It popularly called, now these days they call that metaphysics. But when I was a child, nobody told me about metaphysics. Nobody even said to me, Neale, as you think, so will it be done unto you. Nobody dared tell me anything as dramatic as that when I was 8 or 9 years old. Only as I got to be an older person did I receive that message. I read a wonderful book when I was a young man, around 22 or 23 years old, titled As a Man Thinketh. And it was a wonderful, wonderful book that made it clear to me that our minds are powerful creators of our day-to-day individual and collective reality. The saddest part about that, Christina and Anna, is that our collective reality worldwide is a mess. It's crazy because of our collective mental collection of beliefs, our understandings. We simply don't understand who we are and why we're here.
Most people believe that if God is going to talk to us, it already would have happened thousands of years ago in their religious textbooks.
But it did happen. But it did happen thousands of years ago.
Yeah. How? I guess if they're ready for it, they're ready for it. But what's a key that could help open the door for people to realize that God is talking to us now?
I think to listen to our own experience. What would open us to an understanding that God is talking to us now would be to open ourselves to and to recognize our own experience. In other words, this is what I observe. God is communicating with all of us all the time. Most people are simply calling it something else because it allows them to get away with it. You know, they don't want to be marginalized. They don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be sent to the 7th floor of the hospital or the psychiatric ward. So they call it, women's intuition, or an epiphany, or a sudden insight. They find whatever words they can find for the exact same experience that I had. I simply called it a conversation with God, and they're calling it something else. Coincidence, serendipity, as I said, women's intuition. You ask somebody, how did you know that? I don't know. I just call it women's intuition. I call it a conversation with God. That happens not only to women, but to men as well. Men's intuition.
Yours was a lot more clear, I would say.
Well, it might be more clear. I mean, it's a relative term, but there are some people who've had moments of great insight. I mean, it couldn't have been more clear than that. There's some of the insights that have been brought to us by other human beings who have not called them conversations with God. They've called them simply epiphanies or sudden insights, but they're very clear. Every bit as clear as anything that I brought through. So I'm not the only person who's bringing through clear messages.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of people who say that some people feel as if they create almost like a hierarchy of the insights and epiphanies. Like there's their guides, or there's their higher self, or there's, maybe God's up there. And would you say that all of that is God, or is there like a very distinct thing that is separate from kind of those other things that people will often say are God?
I would say it's all God, and that there's no separation.
Yes. Okay.
The idea that we're separate somehow or another from God, to say nothing of being separate from each other, is the idea that's really causing us to live the lives of struggle and conflict that we're living on this planet. So I think that they're all God, but they're all manifestations of God. We can call a certain manifestation guardian angel, if it pleases you to call it that. Okay, you can call it, your guides, whatever it pleases you to call it. But a rose by any other name is still a rose, and God by any other name is still God. Call it a guardian angel, call it a guide, call it whatever you want.
What are some ways people can show discernment that they are listening to God and not listening to, say, a schizophrenic, violent voice or something? What are some key features of God speaking?
God only speaks and only shares messages of freedom, joy, and love. If the message that you're receiving, however you imagine yourself to be receiving it, is a message of freedom, joy, and love, if it's expansive and enlarges you, then it's a message from the divine. If it's a message of fear or a message that reduces you or causes you stress or worry, or even in any way to feel less than who you really are, then it's obviously a message from another source, from your mind, or from something you read, or something you saw in a movie somewhere, or from any one of a million other sources with which we are assailed increasingly these days, more than we were when I was a young man, by the media and by the internet. We have more messages coming to us now than I ever imagined when I was 25 years old.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So God Talk is your 40th book, right?
Yes.
It's your 40th book. And I'll ask a question about that in a moment, but I'm curious, since since you first published in 1995 until now, coming up on 30 years, right? I'm doing that right in my head.
Yes.
What has been the kind of consistent feedback that you've gotten from people about your work?
It's been 90%, maybe 95% positive. People saying, if I've heard one comment more than any other single comment, it's, this writing changed my life. This writing changed my life. So that's the comment that I hear more often than any other single comment, other than thank you. I hear that a lot as well. So that's been the reaction from the largest number of people. Now, there's a small percentage of people, 8 or 10% of the people, who vehemently disagree with the messages that I received, plus the idea that I even received a message from God. And they tell me, and that's fair, that's okay. I don't need anyone to agree with me. So if someone disagrees and they send me an email or drop me a note or send me a text or whatever that says, I think you're out of your mind. I don't agree with what you're saying. I tell them, thank you for sharing your point of view about that. I have no need for anyone to agree with anything that I've said. And I appreciate anyone who shares their point of view. I think that we can agree to disagree agreeably. And if we could all do that, we could change the world virtually overnight.
Yes. Yes. I kept thinking haters are going to hate, right? Oftentimes,
Until they don't anymore.
Until they don't anymore. Yeah.
Until and unless we can encourage them to listen to the messages we've received from the divine, all through the years. For thousands of years, we've gotten the same message. But I do understand how people could be confused. Anna was talking about, the Torah. It's a frightening book. Certain passages of the Torah and of the Bible and of other sacred scriptures are frightening, because they talk about a God who actually kills people or encourages human beings to kill other people. If you were to take a Bible with both the Old and New Testament as one book with a calculator in your hand and punch in the number every time the book suggests that God says we should be ending the lives of certain people, you will add, I'm not making this up, you can do this with a calculator, you'll wind up realizing that God has told us to kill more than 1 million people.
Wow.
For various reasons. And God has told us as well in the New Testament, in the Torah, and in many other sacred books that if we don't do certain things in a certain way, that we're going to hell for eternity. Now, our lifetime relative to eternity. Imagine eternal life, and one person's life would be a sliver of eternal life. Even if you live to be 80 or 90 or 100 years old, compared to eternity, that's a sliver of time. But we are told to believe in a God who says that what you did that was inappropriate during the sliver of time you were here, you'll be punished for all eternity. And so religion has used fear as a means of encouraging particular and certain behaviors. We were even told we shouldn't have certain foods. If you eat this, it's not okay. It's got to be, unless it's, of course, kosher. But if it's not kosher, you're in trouble.
Right.
Or if you were, when I was a practicing Roman Catholic, I was told as a Catholic child, you couldn't eat meat on Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a sin.
Yeah.
And even today, members of certain religions are told that they have to wear certain kinds of clothing. Or if they don't wear a certain piece of clothing, they will be sent to everlasting damnation when they die. So you better have a veil over your head and over your face. I mean, if you're a woman, a man, of course, we are the superior gender of the species, so it doesn't matter what we do. But if you're a woman, you better cover your face and cover your hair, because we're not allowed to see all that, because it's too tempting. We don't know what to do. We can't control ourselves. So in order to be not tempted by all of that, you have to wear certain clothing. You have to cover your face and cover your hair. And by the way, this is not a small matter. I'm not making fun of this. God says that this is the way you're supposed to behave. And if you don't, you will suffer the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of God we've been told to believe in. You know what I was told? Let me tell you one more story. I was 9 years old. I was in the 3rd grade. And the priest came into our Catholic school to teach us what was called catechism, which is the doctrine and the dogma of the Roman Catholic Church. So the priest is telling us on this particular Wednesday afternoon, his lesson is the difference between mortal sin and venial sin, which are two kinds of sin that are talked about in the Catholic faith. Mortal sin is supposed to be a really major, major offense, a big deal. And we were told by the priest that if we commit a mortal sin and it's not been forgiven by a priest before we die, if we die with a mortal sin on your soul, you will in fact go straight to hell. No questions asked. If it's what's called a venial sin, kind of a spiritual misdemeanor, then you go to purgatory. And I said to the priest, Father, what's the difference between purgatory and hell? He said, well, purgatory is like hell, only it's not forever. I've had a couple of marriages like that, but that's another story. But now I said, Father, can you tell me, give me an example of a mortal sin? He's teaching the class. We're all 8 and 9-year-old kids. He said, certainly. I'm expecting him to say, murdering someone or stealing someone's life savings or whatever it might be. He says it's a mortal sin if you miss Mass on Sunday without a good excuse. My heart sank.
Wow.
A mortal sin that you are sent to hell forever if you miss Mass on Sunday? He said, well, if you have a good excuse now, don't go too far with this. I mean, if you have to care for a sick parent, or if you're an adult and you have to work on Sunday to support your family, fair enough. But if you just decide, well, I'll think I'll go play golf this Sunday, or you just have no excuse, you just decide not to go to church, that's a mortal sin.
Wow.
And if you don't confess it before you die, if you die with that sin on your soul, of course, the Catholic Church allows you to go to confession, and then the priest, pronounces absolution, and you are absolved of the offense. But if you have not been forgiven by a priest before you die, and I even raised my hand because I'm 9 years old. You know how 9-year-olds think. I'm trying to figure out there must be something I don't understand here. I said, Father, what if you're on your way to confession? like it's Saturday, and you're on your way to the church to go to confession, and you get hit by a car. And the priest said, I'm sorry, son. If you die with that sin on your soul, you will be going to hell. Now, as it happened, it was that week that I didn't go to church that Sunday. Almost every Sunday of my life I went to church, but that particular Sunday we had a playground softball, kind of the World Series of softball in our city on our playground. And the kids on the team were saying, come on, Neale, you got to be on the team. The game starts at 10 o'clock. It'll be over in time. You can go to 11 o'clock service. But of course, with my luck, the game went into extra innings and I couldn't leave the baseball field. So I missed the mass. Now the priest is telling me 3 days later on Wednesday that if I don't go to confession and get that sin, confessed and absolved, forgiven, I'll go straight to hell.
Yeah.
That was an expensive baseball game.
At 9 years old, I'm really taking this seriously. I smile about it now, with the wisdom of an adult. But at 9 years old, I can remember saying my evening prayers, practically in tears, because we only had confession once a week in our parish. It was usually Saturday afternoon from 1 to 4. It wasn't like every day. You couldn't go to confession whenever the hell you wanted to. So the priest would schedule it from 1 o'clock till 4 on Saturday afternoon. So this is Wednesday. I'm being told this. I got to go through 3 days without even a chance of being forgiven. I'm saying my prayers at night. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I'm scared out of my mind that I'm going to go straight to hell because I played baseball on Sunday instead of going to church.
Yeah.
Well, I made it to
Religious
confession.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I said it sounds like religious trauma.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's not just the Catholic Church, but so many of our faith traditions use fear to fill the temple, to fill the church, to fill the mosque, to fill the pews. Fill the pews with fear. You better show up or you're in deep trouble.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of a God are we told to believe in? Who would send us to hell everlastingly because we have not worshipped him? But you have to worship him in the right way, by the way. So, of course, I hate to tell you, Anna, but even though you may not be a practicing Jew now, but I have to tell you that Jews are not going to heaven. There are no Jews that go to heaven. Nor are there Buddhists who go to heaven. Nor are there Hindus who go to heaven. Only Christians get to go to heaven. This is what I was told.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have the right passport. It doesn't matter how kind you are, how generous you are as a person, how forgiving you are, how compassionate you are. It doesn't even matter how loving you are. If you belong to the wrong religion, you're going to hell. You think I'm making this up? Ask any fundamentalist Christian. They'll tell you exactly what I'm saying right now.
I know. I've heard it.
Yeah. I once had a conversation with someone and we got to that and and I said, so you've been friends with me this whole time and you think I'm going to hell? And she's like, yeah, no problem with it.
It's like, well, George Bernard Shaw said, it's okay with me. All the interesting people are there anyway.
It's true. It's true. Yes.
If you were to think about the trajectory of your life, if you hadn't written that letter to who you are today, what do you think the other Neale Donald Walsch would be doing right now?
Oh God, I can't even imagine. I don't know, but I don't think he would be nearly as consciously aware of his effect and his impact on other people, whatever he was doing. It's not that what I was doing for a living was not okay. I mean, I was a radio talk show host, and before that, I was a managing editor of a local newspaper. I was gamely employed, so to speak. I as a member of the working press, And so I wasn't like, it's not like I was robbing banks, or doing something horrible like being a lawyer. No, just kidding for all you lawyers out there. But in any event, so it's not about my occupation, what would I be doing, but what would I be being?
Yeah,
How would I
that's
be?
yeah.
How would I be moving through life? I probably wouldn't be as aware of my impact on other people. And I probably wouldn't be, therefore, as kind, as caring, as compassionate, and as forgiving as I find myself being today.
In God Talk, you talk a lot about how we should be talking to God. And you talk about the 6 steps, I believe it is.
Yeah, not how we should be talking to God, but how we're invited to be.
We're invited to be. Yes.
You know,
Thank you.
I wouldn't say don't should on yourself.
Yes, I was always told that it doesn't exist as a word. You can just be much better off if it doesn't exist. So yes, that we are invited to talk to God.
Yes, we are invited to talk to God. In fact, we're talking to God all the time. It's not a question of who's talking to God, nor is it a question of who is God talking to. It's a question of who's listening.
You say, I think it's step 3 is willingness. What are ways that people can be more willing to listen?
By setting aside all the reasons that they have had in the past not to be willing. You understand that it's, here we go again. I hate to be religion bashing, but the fact is, it's just simply true that our religions have told us, most of our religions tell us that if we claim that God is talking directly to and through us, we're committing blasphemy. It's called apostasy. It's called heresy. It's an ecclesiastical sin. It's an offense against God. Religions tell us, most of our religions tell us, that we're not supposed to declare that God is speaking through me and to me, I mean individually. So that's called blasphemy. If I walk down the street and say, God said to me this morning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, in certain countries, I will be held accountable for having committed an ecclesiastical sin. So we have to be willing to discard what our culture has told us. Our culture in most of the world's countries has told us that no, God doesn't, come on. God doesn't talk to people like you. Maybe the God talks to the Pope, maybe. The Pope is considered to be infallible, or the Archbishop of Canterbury, or the Chief Ulama, or the head rabbi. I mean, you got to have some credentials, but God doesn't talk to, the first baseman for the New York Yankees. Come on, stop it. So what we have to do is be willing to set aside our culture's hesitancy, would be putting it mildly, to believe that God talks directly to us, to set aside our culture's objections to the very idea. And that's what willingness is about. We have to be willing to receive the messages of God in spite of the fact that we've been told by every one of our cultural sources that such a thing does not happen. And if you insist that it's happening, we're going to have to send you to that 7th floor of the hospital, the psychiatric ward.
Yeah. Your experience, what is your relationship in terms of your communication with God today look like, as opposed to what it looked like back in 1995?
It's the same.
Yeah.
I simply talk to God. Most people talk to God. Most people say, oh, God, what's going on here? Or God, give me an answer. Or God, people talk to God all the time. So they, as I said earlier, they just call it something else. They don't want to admit it out loud. But my reaction and my experience of that conversation is no different today than it was 30 years ago.
Does it mostly come through writing, or do you hear it in your head, or do you just feel
A
it?
1,000 different ways,
Yeah.
Christina. God is talking to all of us in 1,000 different ways across 1,000,000 moments in hundreds of lifetimes. It could be words. It could be a vision. It could be, a feeling, just simply a feeling that comes over me about something. It could be something as interesting as just a fragrance. It could even just be a fragrance of something. So God will speak to us in a many, many, many different ways across all the moments of our life, not just in words.
Did your dreams change when you started talking to God more?
I think so. I think they became more meaningful. I don't think I had too many more or too many of my old types of dreams. I just had dreams that seemed to be more meaningful.
So with God Talk as the 40th book, what do you feel is like what is like kind of the main message of God Talk as this book, as opposed to any of the ones before, since you obviously are very prolific in wondrous ways?
The main message is, in my view, that we can all have direct communication. I mean, back and
Yes.
forth communication, not just
Yes.
one-way communication. Everyone
Yes.
agrees that we can all pray to God, but not everyone agrees that God talks back to us. So the message of the book is that we can all have two-way communication with the divine.
Yeah.
And that then there are several steps that one can take. You mentioned earlier, the book includes 6 steps
Mhm.
that I recommend that people could embark on as a means of having that experience. The steps are: 1, possibility. We have to agree that it's possible to even have a conversation with God. Number 2, worthiness. We have to agree with life that we are worthy to be among those who is having a conversation with God. You know what's interesting about this, guys? Most of the human race agrees that God has talked to human beings. We were told that God talked directly to Moses and gave Moses the 10 Commandments. And everyone agrees. No one says, no, God didn't talk to Moses. Almost everyone agrees with that story that, yeah, God probably did reveal some important information to Moses. People have heard that God talked to and through a person named Jesus, and billions of people believe that. People believe that God has talked to and through a person named Muhammad, and people believe that. In fact, men and women through the centuries have been listed as messengers from the divine. So no one doubts that God talks to human beings every so often. We might say it's rare, but we agree that it does happen.
Yeah.
So step number 2 is worthiness. Am I as worthy as Moses to receive a communication directly from the divine? So once I say yes to that question, God says, oh, wonderful. Now you know who you really are. Then that third step is willingness, which we talked about a moment ago, being willing to overcome everyone else's hesitancy and objection to our claiming we're having a conversation with God. Step number 4 is wakefulness, to be awake. Don't let the conversations go in one ear and out the other, or pass you by and you don't even know what's going on. It could be the words on the billboard. The next corner you turn on the highway, and there's this 8-word message on the billboard that directs its attention specifically to something you've been worried about. And you think, look at that billboard. That's exactly what I was trying to figure out. Or it could be the lyrics of the next song you hear on the radio, or the chance utterance of a conversation you overhear in a coffee shop. It comes to you in so many different ways. That's what I was saying earlier. So you got to stay awake. Stay awake. I mean, it could be, God forbid, it could be listening to a podcast run by 2 crazy women who think they know what they're doing. And they put a podcast on the radio, on the internet, and maybe you're listening to this crazy podcast, and you go, "Wow, God does talk to us in 1,000 ways across 1,000,000 moments. God is talking to me right now. simply telling me, stay awake. I've never left you.
Yeah.
Step number 5 is acceptance, not to reject what we're hearing and say, it's just coincidence. No, it's my imagination. Or try to dismiss it as not being what it actually is. So step 5 is acceptance, and step 6 is a word you used earlier, discernment. To be able to tell the difference between messages that are coming to life from the source of life itself and messages that are coming to us from another source. A crazy novel we read 20 years ago, or video game we're watching, or some television program, or whatever, that's not really a clear, clean message from the source of pure love that I call God. So those are the 6 steps, and those steps are described in much greater detail in the book, God Talk.
Mm-hmm. And this book is a little different than your other books too. Most of the chapters are written by other people sharing their own personal stories.
Yes, well, the publisher of the book had an idea. She said, we want to make it clear that you're not the only one who's having this kind of experience. We want to make sure that readers see that it's not just about this one guy in Oregon who's had this experience. So they put a call out on the internet, and they invited anyone who ever felt that they had an experience of divine intervention in their life to send them a story. And hundreds of stories poured into the offices of the publishers, and they picked out 7 or 8 of the best stories and put them in the book to offer people proof that's not just Neale Donald Walsch. Here's a doctor, here's a lawyer, here's a housewife, here's an elementary school teacher. Here are other people, ordinary folks who are having their own and are reporting to us what they have experienced as their own encounter with the divine, a direct intervention in their life.
Mm-hmm. Going back to, I don't remember which of the first 3 Conversations with God books, but you asked God in one of the books about, what about in moments of tragedy, like in the Holocaust, I think it was. You said, how is that right or wrong? And God answered that in those moments before these horrific deaths, that people were given great peace. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I'm not sure what the question is.
Okay, well, I was wondering, that gave me like a lot of hope when we read the news and we hear about all these tragic things. Have you talked to God more about, like, in moments of humanitarian crisis or
Yes, I was told that no one dies at a time or in a way that is not of their choosing.
right.
Mm.
And I think you said through him through you, that those last moments are peaceful, even if they don't look like it on the outside, something like that.
Always, yes. She made it very clear to me. She said, Neale, sweetheart, no one dies at a time or in a way that is not of their choosing. Death is a beautiful, peaceful, serene, actually joyful experience. That doesn't argue for ending one's own life, but it does make it clear that when we leave this physical body, the soul will be joyful for sure. And then it will return, reincarnate in another body, at another time, in another place, to continue the experience of its own evolution.
Yeah.
That's a relief, especially watching the news today.
Yeah.
It's not just a relief watching the news, it's a relief just watching your grandma die.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, God bless her, of course, she had no idea I'd ever read a book like this, but I remember the time that she died. I wasn't blessed enough to be there with her when she actually died, but I was there just an hour or 2 before she died in the intensive care ward of the hospital. And she was very, very ill, gravely ill. Everyone knew she was dying. And I was trying to comfort her. And she looked at me. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, sweetheart, don't worry about me." She said, "I'm going home to God. It's okay. But promise me, take care of your father." Even in her final moments on the earth, her concern was for the man she married. Her concern was for someone else and not for herself. "Don't worry about me." Then she said, "I want you to make me a promise." She said, "Sweetheart, don't cry. Take those tears out of your eyes. Make me a promise." Of course, I said, "Anything, Mom, anything, anything. What can I promise you?" She said, "It's on my grave. Dance on my grave." I never forgot that promise. And I did. I flew to Wisconsin, halfway across the country. She died, far away from me. But I flew halfway across the country to the cemetery where she was interred. And I literally did a tap dance on her grave. Because I promised her that I would, in celebration of that, what I then knew that she knew before she was leaving. So we celebrated together her reunion with the divine.
That's so
That's the
beautiful.
kind of mother I had.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's wonderful. Thank you.
So I hope my kids will do the same. And I know one thing. I've told all of my children and my wife and everybody who's close to me that I want 4 words on my gravestone. When I die, I want 4 words etched in concrete on my gravestone. So when people visit my gravesite, they will see those 4 words on my headstone.
What are they?
Now that was fun.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, amen. Whatever word, validating word.
Can you imagine somebody visiting a gravesite and seeing that on somebody's headstone?
Mhm.
Now that was fun. If that doesn't bring a smile to their face and have them skipping out of that cemetery, I don't know what would.
Yeah,
If you're going to leave a message, leave the truth.
yeah, yeah. I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
well, we are coming to the end of our time. So are there any final words from you, from God, from anybody that you'd like to share with our listeners today? Thank you so much for your time and
Well,
presence.
I've often been asked, Neale, of all the messages in the 3,000 pages across 9 books of dialogue with God, what's the single most important message? I've been asked that a lot. But apparently you're not going to ask me. So
Well, yeah,
we can end the program. The program is now over. Thank you very much for being here. Goodbye,
Yeah.
everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
No.
Bye-bye.
No, please. Please.
Sorry, I thought I had asked the question. It's my excuse. Yeah. Yeah. What is it? Please tell us.
God said to me, sweetheart, your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch and the way in which you touch it. Yet when you understand that, you will know, you will come to a place of awareness of the largest truth of life, which is that in a universal sense, your life is about you. When you decide that it's about everyone whose life you touch, because, Neale, there's only one of us in the room.
There's only one of us in the room.
We are all one. All things are one thing, and there is only one thing that is. If you remember that, then you will understand why I have said to you, through other messengers, each in their own way, Love, love, love your enemies. And pray for those who persecute you. And be good to those who would do you evil. And when a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. And when a man asks you for your coat, give him your shirt as well. And when a man demands that you walk 1 mile with him, go with him twain. And raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. I could, of course, be wrong about all of that, but I don't think so.
Thank you, Neale.
Sounds good to us.
We are the same.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Neale,
Thank
for
you.
your time.
And your book did change my life. I mean, it really did. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. It's very sweet of you to share that with me. And I'm humbly grateful for having been given the opportunity to play that kind of a role in the lives of people. Blessed be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find more information on Neale Donald Walsch at his website, www.neildonaldwalsh.com, and you can get God Talks wherever books are sold. And remember,
Humility, gratitude, acceptance. Done.
hey TSF family. So, in case you weren't aware, all of you are healers. We are all healers in the way that we do the work on ourselves so that we can show up better in the world. And by doing that, we model, and every single one of you is doing that. We are all healers. We are all spreading our light. We are all addressing our shadows. And I just want to first say, way to go. I also want to say, if you feel stuck, I'm here. I do intuitive readings. I do intuitive clearings. I help the healers heal. Healing is the practice of integration in which we recognize and accept all parts of us so that we can love all parts of us. The more we love all parts of us, the more that we can love and accept and heal others. So, in perpetuity, all TSF family will receive a 15% discount on their first sessions or healing sessions with me. I'm so grateful for y'all, and I hope to see you soon. Use the code TSFFamily, all one word, for your discount.